I'm joined by none other than Dan Hunt from Meraki Performance. This is actually the third try getting this to work out. Ran into some audio issues, but we got that figured out, it looks like. And so, Dan, why don't you give a little bit of an introduction about yourself, what you do, what Meraki is, and go from there.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you having me. Meraki Performance is an organization, a service that helps individuals and teams be at their best when it matters the most. Mm-hmm. So we really lean into physiology and psychology and trying to leverage both of those for people to experience peak performance or get in the flow state and really begin to get on that constant development journey, I guess you could say. And we find ourselves working a lot with athletes and athletics teams. It's just very simple to lean into that because results are pretty immediate when kids are constantly developing and growing, and you find the cohesion within a team building, and it's maximizing all the individual parts essentially. So, and then we work with a lot of businesses as well. We're leaning into that and helping leaders grow and helping them understand that physiology and psychology behind it. And I would say with physiology, it's not necessarily training, like physical development training and things like that. It's more of human connections. Yeah. Can we create an environment where people are deeply connected, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, yeah. I would even say spiritually, where we're moving towards a common goal and getting them moving in that direction. And then once that's established, how do we develop that, I would say team mentality or organizational mentality in that psychology piece?
Yeah, that's. I think you kind of hit it right on the head there. That was a great description. So something you talk a lot about, and something that we talked about a few weeks ago, was the flow state.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe what that is, and kind of explain to people who don't know what it is, what that kind of, I don't know if you can say feels like, because it feels different for everybody.
Yeah.
But kind of what it is.
Yeah, it's funny because when you describe it, and I'll be sitting in front of 100 athletes, right? And you describe it, they're like, "Oh, I felt that before." Like, I know what you're talking about, right? And so a lot of people call it just being in the zone as well, right? And that's when you have a clear goal, you're receiving immediate feedback and your progress towards that, and then your skill is just above the actual challenge that you face. So there's there's a balance, and it's not unequal where like you're way under and it's way too difficult, or your skill is so far above it that you're bored because there is no challenge, right? And when that happens, what you experience is just this full immersion into what you're doing, and a lot of people lose track of time. Yep. And that's one of the first things when I describe that, they go, "Oh yeah, like I've been in that practice where all of a sudden, boom, it's done." You know what I mean? The other piece is that when you experience failure or mistakes or hiccups, you don't get hung up on them. You actually just take it as information. You keep moving forward because your ego is not attached to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's other descriptions as well, but like descriptors, but that's really kind of the essence of it, I guess, from a 101 level or a foundational level. And I think that it's very easy to, I shouldn't say easy, it's more likely to recognize that a lot of times in athletics, but I say you can have that when you're playing music. And not even I say, like science has shown you can experience that with music, singing, writing, the arts. You can do that in a conversation. And when I talk to business leaders, a lot of times I go, have you ever had that one-on-one conversation with somebody and it's so engaging that all of a sudden it's like, boom, an hour and a half went by and you go, what happened? Like you're in the flow state.
Yeah. So kind of it's when a guy gets on fire and he has like 6 shots in a row or when you're deep in work and you're not really focusing, I shouldn't say not focusing. You're focused, but you're not distracted by things around you.
Yep.
It's that kind of stuff, if I'm understanding.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how can, something you mentioned was getting in that flow state, finding that skill, having your skill level be just above the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what's just above your skill level? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously know what your skill level is, but how do you know a challenge that's too big or a challenge that's too hard, and when to find something that's less of a challenge?
Yeah. I would say it's not necessarily that the challenge is too hard. It's your perspective in the way you're going about it. Right. And so let's say right away, like one of the things I said 3 years ago is like, I'm not good with technology. I'm just not good with it, right? Like the challenge of technology and doing different things, even a podcast. I just can't do it, right? And so first I needed to break it down and say, if I want to have the skill of doing X, Y, and Z, what's the first step?
Yeah.
And so my skill seems like I have no skill, or there's no possibility of gaining the skill or developing the ability when I look at it from a 30,000 foot view in maybe the completed product. And when I solely focus on that. But if I can break it down and begin to say, okay, what's the first thing that I can take action on and get really, really well at?
Yeah.
Right. And then what's the next step? And what's the next step? And like, maybe not a great example, but even podcasting, like the first step was, can you sit in front of a camera and just say something for 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And then like review it and say, hey, did that make sense? Did you articulate your point clearly? Could you do it better?
Yeah.
Could you go for 3 minutes? Could you like have somebody lob you a question, then do it, and you start gaining skill over time and developing it.
Yeah.
And then eventually, you get on a podcast and you talk, man, you share your knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it's like building up to that.
Yeah. So challenge you a little bit.
Yeah.
I got a really good defender guarding me.
Yep.
In basketball. How would I go about getting into a flow state with that guy?
Yeah.
Like he's top 5 defenders in West Michigan sports basketball this season. And I'm a good offensive player, not that good. What would you say would it be to look elsewhere? Like, no, okay, this kid's a pretty good defender. I'm not going to get around him 99% of the time. Is it find another way to score? What is that? Like, in your mind, what does that look like? And I'm only relating this back to basketball because that's what I know best.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, I love that. So let's play this scenario out. Way I'm understanding is that you have a good defender you're playing against, right?
Yep.
You're an offensive player. And so if you look at it from the outcome solely, right? One, I need to score, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to score. Well, one, that's variable. Why is it variable? Because you have a defender.
Yeah.
He gets a vote, right? The second thing is when you're looking outside of yourself, you're looking to him. Oh, well, he's top 5. He's top whatever, like, right?
Yeah.
And so the first thing I would do is say, like, how do you want to show up? What's your performance look like?
Yeah.
And how do you want to show up?
Yep.
And let's try to not focus on him. Obviously, there's going to be some focus because we need to adapt and adjust and things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't want the majority of my focus there. I want to look at it and go, yep, he's good. All right. And now this is what I'm going to do. And so then I start looking at if I'm trying to drive the hole and I have this move and like we're running a scheme and I'm doing this one thing and he's shutting it down, maybe I break it down a little bit, you know, like, so instead of all the 4 actions, I'm looking at a single action. I need to explode off and get past him and then put my hands up for that ball and then go to the hoop. Right. And so I'm no longer worried about, everything else. I'm worried about the explosive, right? The step, and then I go. And if I do well with that and I'm in a better position, great, that's a win.
Yep.
Right? That's taking something and saying, I'm going to not lower the skill, but I'm going to take the challenge that seems really big and I'm going to bring it back in because the reality is that my skill is good enough to get one explosive step and get around him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It might not be good enough to shoot where he's in my face, but I can do this skill or I can do that. And you start focusing on some of those things.
So focus on break it down into little tasks and then say, okay, I can beat this guy off the dribble.
Perfect.
Let's do that. If that doesn't work out, okay, we know where we're going to go. We're going to swing around the horn.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. I get that.
Yep.
So you've coached for a long time. To a coach, how do you get your guys to understand or how do you get your guys to, buy in to that idea?
Yeah, it can be really difficult. That's the reality of it, because we want the outcome. We evaluate ourselves solely on the outcome typically, right? And obviously it feels good when you explode off and you go and you score the basket, right? That feels good. And when you're in that frustration and hitting that wall and it's not happening, that doesn't always feel good, So I think there's a couple things. One is to talk about mastery more than anything else. Mm-hmm. How do you master the skill? How do you master the process? How do you master yourself? How do you master the game so that in any given situation, you have the belief that you have the skills to overcome. And you have the belief that maybe you don't have the skill to do it this way, but you have a skill to go a different way. Or maybe I can take that skill and say, what's the smallest little bit of that and be really good at that and then build momentum back up to the overall skill. You know what I mean? I think that's a big piece. the other piece is like being able to talk to athletes and help them understand that frustration isn't always bad. Frustration doesn't mean stop. Frustration is actually what you need to learn, adapt, to develop, and grow.
Yeah.
And so helping them lean into that and be able to say, look, even though you're frustrated, that doesn't mean we're doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's to some degree helping them shape a mindset that shifts experiences from, you know, if we don't give them the narrative, here's the thing that I actually talk about this quite often with coaches is, and I get pushback on it all the time, but like we shape our reality.
Yeah.
To a large extent, especially in athletics, like you that defender, right? We're playing that game. You might go to it and go, man, like this guy, he's huge. What am I going to do? I don't know. And I might go into it and go, man, this is the best thing that's ever happened in my game. I get to play this, like, and it's the same experience, how we're looking at it. And so I share that because I think coaches have an immense opportunity to help kids reshape and reframe and shape a different narrative around some of these things they experience. Because if we don't, it's not natural for us to get excited about the tough road. It's not natural at all for us to do that.
It's one of the things that I find personally really tough is when things suck, finding the drive. And if you ask a lot of people who know me and know me personally, that's something that they'll tell you firsthand.
Sure.
When it hurts real bad, finding that, the way I think of it is I go back to cross country in high school, and I think, okay, I got a 5K to run, thinking, okay, that first mile felt pretty good. I ran a 5 flat or 5:15. My goal is sub 18 or sub 19. Like I'm doing pretty well. But then you get to the second mile, it starts to hurt. And breaking through that barrier is where something that I think a lot of people, including myself, really, really struggle with. And I think a good way to kind of embody that is Clay Jansek used to say it all the time: embrace the suck. Give it a big old hug. Let it come to you. And when it comes to you, embrace it. Just say, you know what, you're here. I don't care. You're here. It sucks.
Yeah, if you break that down, is there a biochemical response to the pain? Absolutely. Like there's things happening in your body. Absolutely. But if you take it to an even, like, maybe that's the deepest level, but if you take it to another level, I look at pain as it's just a sensation in your body. And you get to decide as much as you want whether or not it's good, it's bad, it's whatever it is, you know? And I started messing around with this about 3 years ago. My wife thought I was crazy. And maybe I am, but I used to start, I was like, I want to like do things to help shape that reality. Like I want to challenge this. Right. And so what I started doing is I started getting in the shower and turning it as cold as possible and just telling myself it's water. It's water. Who decided what was hot? Who decided what was cold? It's water. All you're feeling right now is a sensation. Now, you don't have to like the sensation, but it's not good, bad, it's whatever. It's water, right? And over time, what I found is that I went from being able to stand in a shower cold for a minute or for like 10 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Now it doesn't even bother me, right? Same thing with cold plunges. You know what I mean? And so, again, it's helping you understand pain can be an informer. It can be a developer. It can also be a suppressor of skill. And so without us reframing that a little bit, and to your point, that guy saying like, embrace the suck, I've worked with a collegiate cross-country runner. And so similar, he'd get into the race and at first it feels good, right? And when we go based on emotions, we're going to go up and down. And he'd get to that point and he'd be like, man, it's starting to burn. I don't like this. You know, he starts wrestling. And now you're wasting cognitive energy wrestling with that. And then it would be, I got to keep up with this guy. Oh, that guy's leaving. Like, what do I do? And so one of the things we did is, like, we know the pain's coming. We welcome it as a friend. Right? And all this sounds weird, but it's like, okay, the pain's coming. What does it tell me? Well, it doesn't tell me to stop. It tells me to keep going. It tells me to do X, Y, and Z. It tells me to stay focused on each step or stay focused on this thing that helps bring my best. In the tail end of his collegiate career, especially his senior year, he was running.
Quick break from the action to thank our sponsor. Meraki Performance is a leader in performance coaching. Whether you're looking to motivate your business or your athletic team, Meraki Performance can help. Check them out at merakiperform.com.
in some of his best times.
Yeah.
And it was a minor tweak, but it was him being able to say, I'm done wrestling with this pain and I want to avoid it. Like, welcome it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And I'm done wrestling with where these people are. I'm going to focus on me more and more.
So just to segue kind of off that, and you might not have any, I wouldn't say expertise, but you might not completely, this might be a little outside of your normal FOV.
Yeah.
How do you segue that to emotional? So say somebody it's not physical pain, but it's emotional pain.
Yeah.
How do you just ignore that? Because I almost think sometimes emotional pain can be more painful than that. So how would you go about having that same mindset to emotional pain? Because when you don't deal with emotional pain, it shows up in other ways, like sleep and a bunch of other things. How would you say go with that? How would you say to kind of get through that?
Yeah, love that question. And we lean into that a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because emotions drive a lot if we don't recognize them for what they are. And if we don't find the root of what the thinking or thought is driving the emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing with emotion is that there's primary emotions and secondary emotions.
Yeah.
And so it's about you working through in like logically processing that as quick as possible. Okay. And so the example I'll give is, like I walk into the podcast studio, right? I sit down, I'm hanging out, and you come in behind me and you scare me, right? I'm going to get that fear. I'm going to get that, oh my gosh, you startled me.
Yeah.
And then my logic is going to take over and I'm going to go, oh man, he's just messing with me. Like I'm safe. There's nothing wrong, right? Not processing through and finding the facts or being logical about it. I feel that same sensation. Then I begin to think about it. And now I'm driving emotions.
Yeah.
Right. And so now it's like, how dare him do that? Oh, why would he do that to me? And I start getting upset about that. And then I'm looking around every corner, like I'm going to get him back. Like, and now I'm looking for vengeance. Right.
Yeah.
I can't believe he did that. And so instead of processing through like, hey, dude, you're safe. You're fine. You might not like it. I didn't like the feeling. I didn't like the sensation, but I'm good.
Yeah.
It doesn't threaten who I am. I know who I am. I'm going to keep moving forward. And I process logically, find the facts, and then I move on.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense, the way you explain that. And I think that's a lot of people should take kind of a note from that. I think something that a lot of people struggle with is looking for the facts in those hard times. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And not looking for the facts and then saying, okay, here's the facts.
Yeah.
How can I get better from this?
Yep.
It's a conversation that I've had with many people. Like, okay, what are the facts? Like, what really, really happened? Okay, now let's take that. I know it sucked, and it might not have been your fault, but how can we get better? Right?
Absolutely.
How can we say, you know what, this sucked, this was not easy, this was painful, but how can we go about make it better next time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which kind of segues into my next question, recovery.
Yeah.
I know this is something we talked about quite a bit in the last time you came on.
Yep.
When it comes to recovery, going back to the emotions thing, how do emotions and recovery tie together? I know when you're tired, you sometimes are grumpy or so on and so forth. How do you think that plays into something like that? Yeah,
that's a great question. One, like I want to say with emotions too, right? Because I think it all ties together. But with emotions specifically, we believe we have this idea that mental toughness is like suppressing the emotion. You're gonna feel nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's not human at all, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna feel things. It's how you navigate those things and how you leverage those things, right? And with the fact like recovery, what I have found is when you don't allow yourself to truly recover, when you don't allow yourself to pause and actually restore mentally as well as physically, what happens is that you aren't able to navigate and logically process through things as well. Yeah. And so it's very easy to go to the emotional boom, right? Yeah. It's also very like it wears you down when you are constantly doing that emotional tug, right? So you get more and more tired. And I talk to athletes all the time. It's like when you're on that roller coaster and like something great happens and you're flying high and you got all the belief in the world, and then something bad happens, again, external, and then you crash. And you do that over and over and over again. Like, how do you feel at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm just worn out. You know what I mean? And so you need that recovery to be able to find the facts and to be able to dig into that. And the other piece I would say with this too is, in the moment when, you know, using that example, when you scared me, right? If you didn't scare me, but if you scared me like that, I can't just logically go, oh, you're safe. I have to be able to take a couple deep breaths. My nervous system just got hijacked, and I'm like a lightning storm inside trying to figure out what's going on. I need to be able to breathe a little bit. I need to be able to reset that nervous system. I need to be able to calm myself down. And I might not get to a perfectly calm level, but enough to where I can shift my focus from what just happened in the perceived threat to, all right, let's logically process through this. And that's the thing that I think coaches could really take away from this right now, is that when you have that kid that, you know, threw an interception, right? Fumbled the football, missed a block, like they did something, you know, missed the game-winning shot, right? I would say one of the worst things to do in that moment is like, hey, you're okay. You're okay. It's like, they don't feel that way, and they definitely aren't listening to that. They can't.
They're walking by going, dang, let my whole team down.
Exactly.
They're like, they're just thinking, man, I know that's actually, it's funny that you say that, because I remember it's like that car ride home after a tough away game with your parents. And your dad. And you're sitting in the front seat, and your dad's just like, you did this, this, and this. And this, and you're just like, well, I don't care. Like, not right now.
Well, there's a couple things at play there, right? One is that in your mind in that moment, you're looking at all those things, and you're probably taking them all as a threat to yourself and your self-worth, and your self-worth on the team, and whether or not you're a good player. And so you're in a state of like, I'm protecting my ego. Right? And so you're not going to be able to think through and process through objectively. Every single piece of information is either validating or discounting your value as a player or a teammate. You know what I mean? And so that's where you really need to breathe and calm things down. The other thing at play there too is that this is great for parents. I actually gave a talk up at Fair State about this, was when you have that conversation after the game, and that is your conversation about, you did this wrong, and your playing time, and this touch, and this, and maybe even it goes to the coach did this wrong, right? What you're communicating is that, like, we're focusing on results, and we're focusing on validating your ego and your worth as a player through the results. Right? But if you're talking about the attitude and the effort, in you know, hey, we did good here, we're, you know, and maybe not going into even how we exactly played, but more of interactions and the effort and how you showed up and you were true to yourself, right? Like, hey, that huge defender, hey, man, he was tough, but man, dude, you were relentless. You kept going. Every single time you touched that ball, you kept driving the hole. And I kept seeing you adapt and flex and do different things, right? And we reinforce who you are as a competitor. Now we're talking about mastery. And then it's much easier to go into the next day of practice and say, okay, how does that show up again? And now let's review like our game yesterday, and what can we take away from it? And that's a big shift. But I'm telling you, I've seen it more times than once when you make that shift and you focus on that mastery, how much the performance goes through the roof for kids. And when you focus on the ego, over time, how it just suppresses their performance.
So what is your kind of I think your results focused comment was a very valid one. Looking at a good example of that in just everyday life would be like teaching. Right? Teachers are evaluated now on how well their students are performing. How do you think that plays in there too? Like, how do you equate it to the same as a sports game? Well, you did this, and this wrong. Okay, but the kids went from here to here. And some kids might be here in a different spot from a learning standpoint, from a where they're at standpoint, but got to here. How do you think we measure that? As a kind of more from a culture level, how do you think we measure that?
It's so hugely loaded. But one, I will say, I do believe results matter at the end of the day, especially in athletics. Like we're out there, we want to win. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You don't want to go out there and not win. And that's not
absolutely.
I'm more saying like, because your question, your statement kind of, I kind of parlayed it into the teaching thing, because I think that's a really good example, right? You're always going to have those teams that do great things. You're always going to have the teachers that do great things, and they're always going to have the performing students. But there are some times where you get that group of students that maybe isn't as bright as the class before. And that's nothing against those students.
Nope.
I'm just saying more like as a culture overall. And as from sports standpoint, and furthermore, that sports standpoint into, a teaching or whatever standpoint, how do you go about measuring that? And what criteria do you want to meet when you are measuring that?
I think that it can be difficult to measure, obviously, right? But I think the education piece is fascinating, and I'm leaning into that more and more. What I personally experienced in education is that the education system did not motivate me.
It didn't me.
It didn't motivate me. It was absolutely suppressing to me. It was I remember actually, and I won't say the school that I went to, but I remember getting on the not honor roll list, but 3.0, right? And I wasn't academically gifted, you could say, right? And getting on the not honor roll, but 3.0, and getting up there and getting my award, sitting back down in high school, and the all A's and B's and all A's get up there. And I remember, and I will never forget, a teacher saying, "Hey, everybody out there, remember this moment, because they're going to be your bosses." And I was like, really? Because intelligence is the number one indicator of success. Really? Right?
Book smart though.
Right. It's like, hold on a second. You know what I mean? And so I think that the education system, they're trying, because we need to have measurables, and they're trying to figure it out. But right now the environment, again, has got it so ego focused and so validated by the outcomes and the results. And the teachers are the same way, because the environment that we have is that way. I think that there needs to be more emphasis on who are you as a person and how does that show up.
Developing that person. I think
absolutely
a good way to do that would be, they're doing it more now. With the, you're going to these school fairs or like these job fairs and stuff, but finding out what you really like to do from an early age.
For sure.
So that what I'm finding, and I've been out of school for a few years now, what I'm finding is that a lot of kids in my class really had no idea what they wanted to do.
They're and why should you?
But going back to high school, I look back at it and I'm like I was one of the kids that was academically gifted. I didn't try though. That's where there was no motivation to try, right? Like, what is going to motivate me to go that 115% for something that I get a cool medal for?
Because
everybody's getting the same certificate at the end of the day.
And because for you, again, that it was an external reward. And that external reward wasn't driving, and they weren't connecting you to what's your internal drivers. Like, I remember an internal driver for me, and you can obviously see in the work that I do, is like, I want to be at my best, and I want to impact everybody else to be at their best. I want to help them, right? And I remember going to a teacher and saying, "Hey, I know NHS, like they serve and they do things in community and they help people and this, and like the school student council, like and he's like, "No, you're not the kid we want." And I'm like, because I don't have all A's? You know what I mean? Because I'm not striving for the external reward that you guys have set for me. You know what I mean? And I think there is ways to measure that. To go back to your question, I think that some of it it can be individualized, and that takes a lot of effort and work and relationships.
It takes a lot of effort. I think if you look at it just from purely a logistical standpoint, measuring individually each of those kids is extremely hard. Like, you're looking at a whole new system. A's and B's don't cut it anymore, because are you proficient or not?
But we have to look at, and I still think that you can evaluate based on that, right? And I think you can set benchmarks. Like, so there are things like how reading or how mathematics
Yep.
or accounting or even the sciences and me becoming knowledgeable in these can help push me forward to where I want to go, or even connect to some internal drivers that I have, but that there's space for me to explore what those things are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've always been, everybody's got to learn algebra, right?
Yeah.
I've always agreed with that. I'm not saying the content is the problem here. I'm just kind of curious. Like in school, I look back and I regret it a little bit. Like, man, if I had tried that much harder, right, I would have been 4.0. I was 3.82 when I graduated.
Sure.
Or I was just outside of whatever the highest medal was. I was the one right below that.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, if I had just put like an hour more in, I would have been
Sure.
would have been there. But there was no reward. Like I got a cool medal when I graduated, and I get to tell 1-2 people in my entire life that, oh, I graduated with this specific type of honors.
Yeah.
Like, cool. 90% of people aren't going to care.
Yep.
Like for me, what the reward was being able to say, like, hey, I graduated. I've got a job.
Yep.
A week after high school. I got a house a week after high school.
Yep.
I've done this, and I have these skills graduating.
Yep.
I can help people in this way. And
Yep.
that was always the driver, right? I remember when we first started SportsNet up, I was kind of a part of that. And everybody in my class knew that that was who I was. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at Montague, so it's not that hard. There's only like 90 kids in my class. So everybody knows everybody, but everybody knew I was a SportsNet guy. Well, what ended up happening is I'm the guy who's helping people. I'm the guy who's going to go help my buddy or somebody I don't even know usually with their computer. I'm going to go help the teacher with their computer.
Yep.
Try and help them figure it out. My driver was always to help people.
Yep.
And give people the opportunity to help each other.
Yep.
Right. And in school, I don't feel like just the medal that you get helps you do that. I feel like all the extra programs, like we had Renaissance or
Sure.
we had that stuff, always helped. But finding that reward was always tough for me.
Yep.
And some people will say, well, shouldn't need a reward to perform well. I get that, but as a high school kid, it's hard.
It's part of maturing, right?
Yeah.
And so you're talking a lot about motivation, inspiration, and those two things, and the internal drivers like that. That inspiration, and you need both. Like I know there's people that are like, as long as you love it, you could do it for the rest of your life. Yes. But
You're
there's
not gonna love every job.
Well, the thing is like there's also the acceptance of what you're doing and the exchange of value to some degree. And so if you're constantly doing this and there isn't some sort of also exchange, over time you get worn out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You could have helped everybody in your school, but if it was like, yeah, it's expected, whatever. Yeah. And there's not some sort of like value added or exchange.
There's no thing.
Yeah, like eventually you get to a point of like, okay, it's in what it goes back to that physiology standpoint, right?
Yeah.
You send them this signal, right? Or they ask you for help, you send them this signal, and then they're not like actually meeting that norm with either a thank you or appreciate you or hey, you're the best or whatever that may be. Eventually you just go, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't belong. I don't connect. We're not there. You know what I mean? And so there has to be motivators in the inspiration, the internal drive. I think that schools can do a better job actually creating space for kids to run that internal drive down. And then we can also do better at connecting the motivators or some of the outcomes that we desire these kids to have and say, hey, here's how your inspiration aligns with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, I think I graduated with like 2.2, right? But I have a master's degree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I ended up finding out what I loved, chased it down, got a bachelor's degree, got a master's degree. And now, you know what I mean? And it's funny because then, you have a chip on your shoulder. Part of the motivation was I want to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah.
But in the process of doing that, I fell in love with me developing and me becoming the best version of myself and me giving that away. Yeah. And now it's like, I don't need to prove anything to anybody. Like I like who I am and I like what I'm doing. And I say that to bring it back to, I think we have that opportunity in athletics.
Yeah.
and being able to use that as the catalyst for kids to start getting to that point and self-evaluating more than just the outcomes. And I think there's tons of opportunity in schools. And there are some local school districts in West Michigan that are leaning in hard to it and having good conversations about it.
So you mentioned inspiration. How do you find that?
Yeah.
It and I know that's a pretty tough question, but for somebody who's struggling to find, they can go and watch, that motivational video.
Yep.
David Goggins saying, just get up.
Yep.
Or whatever. How do you find that? Right?
Yeah.
Like what steps do you need to go through to be able to find that? Like for some people, I know it's different for everybody, but where do you start?
Yeah. I think it's extremely difficult to find that, especially in our time right now, in our society. And the reason why is because there is so many external inputs in our lives.
Yeah.
Like, I won't say telling us how to be, right? I won't maybe go that far, but man, is there a lot of prompts and a lot of influences and a lot of inputs saying, this is how you should show up. You want more attention? This is what you do. Hey, you want that? You need to do this, right? And then you do that, and there's more validation. There's more refined. And so I think it's really, really, really hard, but I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think that, I've gone down this rabbit hole quite a bit, obviously, and when you really boil down inspiration at the end of the day, it means to essentially breathe life, right? It's like inhaling oxygen into your lungs, right? And so I think that's one of the first things you start with. What gives you life? What truly gets you excited and you feel like you could just run whatever down and go and do it, right? For me, when I was coaching, I loved coaching. I loved seeing people progress. It wasn't necessarily the biomechanics and the execution of the sport.
Yeah.
It was the display in the development and even diving into the mental barriers that were broken for athletes as they did that. And I was in tune to that. I realized that. And it's funny because I think people inspire us too.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's my grandfather.
Yeah.
And people ask me where did all this start for you? And I a lot of reflection, a lot of thinking and just sitting and processing through and pausing and giving myself space. But my grandfather used to tell me from I was 4 years old, I remember this: good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good is the better and the better is the best.
Yeah.
Right. And he would always say that.
Yeah.
It constantly. I'd hit a challenge and it wouldn't be hey, what's going on? What would we? It's hey, good, better, best. Never let it rest. The good is the better is the better is the best.
Just saying, that's going to be a clip.
Right on. Yeah. And I just kept telling myself that and kept telling me, and I'd face challenges, and that was the narrative that I'd drive forward.
Yeah.
All right, this isn't my best. How do I make the good better, the better best? How do I keep moving forward? How do I keep, And so he was an inspiration to me. He literally, in times that I know I was struggling, was like that breath of fresh air for me, and to some degree, almost life to keep me going. You know what I mean? And I think to answer your question, you have to pause. You have to tune things out. You have to block the phone, flip the phone out, sit in a room and be okay to be by yourself for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To have no music or go outside and just sit out there. And the second piece of that is I think you really start asking questions. What is it that I really enjoy to do? What is it that brings me life? What is it that I find I could do for hours on end and get into that flow state, and time would just fly by and I do it over and over and over again. And you start exploring some of those things, I'll say it's a maturity process too. In my 20s, it was coaching. I'm going to coach tennis.
Yeah.
It's what I'm good at. It's what I'm going to do this, right? And part of it was I'm going to prove everybody else wrong, right? And then over time of me pausing and reflecting and maturing, I realized, no, it's not just tennis. It's I want to help people, and I want to be at my best. I'm inspired every single day of you have greatness within you. You have greatness within you. And what can we do to bring that out? One, to recognize it for what it is. And it doesn't have to be athletic greatness. I tell people often, it can be a business leader. It can be the mom. It could be a teacher. It could be whatever. But you recognizing that and then you taking daily actions to bring that out.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just nailed it right on the head. I think a lot of people in this society, like you said, have trouble finding that inspiration, finding where that breath of life comes from. And I think it's mostly because of these things.
It's a big piece.
I think it's very hard. You can go on TikTok and you can watch Joe Rogan, or you can watch all of these successful people and these motivational speakers and this and that. They're just going to tell you the same thing. You got to find it. But they're not, like, it's hard to just say to those people who are struggling to find it, you won't find it until you find something you love.
Yeah.
I love to be in sports. So what I found is, in high school, I was never a great athlete. Like I said, there's a reason that this podcast is named the Benchwarmers because I was on the bench. But what I found is the things that were important to me were team.
Yep.
Team before I.
Yep.
If you ask pretty much anybody on my teams, I would lay down on the tracks for any single one of them.
Yeah.
Even the ones that I would get frustrated with.
Yep.
And I loved sports. Those are the two things I loved. And I also loved tech. And finding those things that you love and then implementing them into whatever you're doing helps you find inspiration. Now, am I saying every day you're the most inspired person ever?
Sure.
And that every day I come in here and I'm like, man, I want to work today. I just want to go.
Yeah.
No, like not every day. If that was every day, I would have so much stuff done.
Yeah.
I would not have anything to work on
Yep.
I was like that. But it's 90%.
Yep.
Right. It's 90% of the days I am happy to be here.
Absolutely.
I want to be here.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people struggle to find that drive.
Yeah.
And find that inspiration. And what ends up happening is you have a lot of people who are in places that they don't really like to be.
Absolutely.
And you get a lot of unhappy people.
Absolutely.
Who are just kind of sitting there.
Yep.
Just kind of like, oh, well, I'll be here because I want to be here.
Yeah. And I would say to that and add a little bit is like leaning into that and finding that probably wasn't always easy for you.
Yeah.
Like there was probably some really frustrating times.
Yeah.
There was some probably times where you're like, and even as you've helped with this and you've launched this and you've done this and you've done, like there's probably times where you've questioned, like, is this really, like, what is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
But the thing that you find is the more that you keep going and you don't evaluate it based on everybody else, you evaluate it based on like, no, this is what I love to do.
Yeah.
And this is serving the purpose that I desire to serve.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this and it's this niche that I'm creating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when you do that, you realize like, yeah, like I'm living the life that I want to do. And I think that, again, I go back to athletes because they can do that in athletics.
Yeah.
I believe that you can get, and I've seen athletes get to a point of like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to show out, I'm going to compete my hardest every single night. I'm going to be that team guy. I'm going to do those things. I'm going to embrace the role that I have, and I'm not going to worry about what everybody else says about me.
Yeah.
Right? And there's times where I'm sure it creeps in. It does for everybody, right? But I would rather live my life going, yeah, I'm going to block that out again. That didn't feel good, but I'm going to block that out again, than constantly listening to that. And I don't know last thing I'll say with that is like, I don't know how many times I've crossed paths with middle-aged dads or business owners, and they're like, dude, I don't even know what I want out of life.
Yeah.
Like I just started working.
Business, but you're like,
I hate this. I want to sell it.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, really, dude? You know, but they have all the material items and all the thing where people go, man, that guy's so successful. I want to be like him. And behind the closed doors, that guy's like, dude, my life. Oh, dude, I hate my life right now. And you're like, really? What's up? You know, and it's to that point they never paused and found that.
So how do you think sleep and rest and recovery play into that? I know what I kind of mean to that is, do you think people are less happy consistently when they're not recovered?
Yeah, I don't know if there's
there might not be science.
Yeah, I don't know if there's science or research behind that, but I can tell you from experience, for me personally too, is like when I'm not recovered and I'm not fully rested, it's very easy for my focus to go to the things that I don't want to experience.
Let's take another moment to thank our sponsor, Shoreline Restoration and Construction. Did a storm recently hit your business, home, or other building? Then Shoreline Restoration and Construction can help. They are a leader in remodels, new construction, and much, much more. They also restore water-damaged buildings, flooded basement, and so much more.
Don't want to see, and I don't, you know what I mean?
And ignore them almost.
Or I'm running from them, right? And then it perpetuates a cycle, or it perpetuates that pattern. I could absolutely see that. And then, yeah, you just endlessly driving forward with no aim.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people struggle to stay motivated or have hunger and desire is like there's no clarity on what really matters. And the things that are given to them, back to the school example, the things that are given to them that, hey, this really matters, doesn't really matter to them. And so I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm not going to lie to myself and say I really truly
It
care
shouldn't
about
matter.
it. It doesn't matter to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
It doesn't. These things matter to me. And if it helps me get to that same position, great. You know what I mean?
But this is what's more important to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you kind of parlay that into like finding so you mentioned that recovery and it somewhat you in your mind correlates to that.
Yeah.
When you're not recovered, do you think that people are more likely to have those dull moments, more likely to have the moments where they're just like, I don't really want to be here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, one, your cognitive energy just is low.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the other thing is that you, again, it's easy to focus on things that you don't want.
Yeah.
And when you do feel something, it's probably an emotional feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're like almost setting yourself up to be on this roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And the other piece is like people start slamming energy drinks and doing everything they can to stimulate themselves for the dopamine and all that stuff, you know? So I think a lot comes to play with that. But for me, when I'm tired, it's difficult for me to pause and be thankful for the things around me. And I know people are like, oh, thankfulness and woo woo. It's like, there's a lot to that. Yeah. There's a lot to just pausing and being like I'm lucky for this. Yeah. I'm grateful for this. Like, thank God we have the opportunity to have conversations like this. You know what I mean? That we don't live in a country or a place where like conversations at this level can't happen because we're so focused on surviving. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like we're super lucky. Yeah. And I think when you're exhausted, you can't find the little moments like that. Yeah. Because you're almost going through the motions, man.
Do you think people burn out because they're not recovered? So as in like, I'm a basketball player, and I'm playing basketball, or sorry, I'm gonna switch this to golf because I play a lot of golf. Yeah, I play in golf over and over and over again, but I'm sleeping 3 hours a night. Yep. Do you think people get burned out of the things that they love because they're not recovered?
I think that one, physically and psychologically, your brain has a switch to cut off and to stop yourself from ever getting to the place that you like physically run yourself straight into the ground. Yeah. Right. And so I would say for me personally, in my experience, I struggle sometimes with the burnout idea. Yeah. Because I think that the idea that we present it as a lot of times is like, I'm just physically, I can't do it anymore. Right. Yeah. I don't have anything more in the tank. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's actually probably a lot more in the tank. You probably have a second, third, fourth, fifth wind even. You know what I mean? I think the struggle a lot of times is that we lose focus of the thing that actually matters to us within that pursuit. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so we lose focus. Like to your point, if your focus was ultimately with basketball, being on the court, and being and doing this and getting playing time and getting so many points a game, I'm not saying that you can't desire those things, and I'm not saying you can't work hard for those things. But if you're solely evaluating your success on those things and you're not experiencing it, you're going to experience what we call burnout, right? Yeah. What I would say is that maybe you just shifted your focus from what truly matters to you to something that doesn't. Yeah. And when you realign and go, and I've seen this with kids, I've seen this on teams. Kids get focused on that and they're like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Yeah. And I go,
they want playing time. They want this, they want that. And that's their entire goal. Right. But in reality, maybe that's not them.
Well, and I say, hey, have the goal. That's fine. Right. But what are the things that you can do that are aligned with who you are and what you love that can help you get there? Yeah. Like being that good teammate, cheering people on, going the extra mile, right? Saying, hey, we're after practice. Let's keep running routes. Hey, we're after practice. Let's run this drill. Let's do this scheme. Hey, let's play some one-on-one. Hey, you need to work on that explosion to the hoop. Let's set up some drills and do that. Yeah. Right? Now all of a sudden, you're focusing on the things that one is within your control, two are aligned with who you are, right? Yeah. And three, they're aligned with where you want to go. And I would say you're helping everybody else around you get better. Yeah. And I've watched kids on the edge of being completely done with the sport to be able to realign and focus on those things and not only get a better performance out of themselves,
Yeah.
but also get themselves away from that burnout or quitting.
Yeah. Well, we're running a little short on time.
Yeah.
I think this was a really, really, really good conversation. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
Sorry that we had to do it a second time.
All
but
good, man.
I think we've had two now really good conversations.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to get some good clips out of this.
Cool.
There's a few good quotes there. But I appreciate you coming on, and I hope your podcast goes well.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.